Greetings, friends. My name is Pavol Shtermach, and now we will unveil the top news of recent days. Ukraine successfully hit a Russian Su-57 aircraft for the first time in history. On the territory of the airfield Akhtubinsk in the Astrakhan region of the Russian Federation, located 589 kilometers from the combat line, a Su-57 multi-purpose fighter jet was hit. This is evidenced by satellite images of the aircraft parking at the enemy airfield, reports the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. The pictures show that the day before the attack, the Su-57 was standing intact, and on the next day, there were ruptures from the explosion and characteristic spots of fire caused by damage. I would like to note that the Su-57 is Moscow's most modern fighter, which can use Ha-59 and Ha-69 missiles for strikes. There are a few such unique aircraft in Russia. Mass media are now in the stage of denial, although some military correspondents confirmed the strikes on the plane and said that they are now learning how significantly the damage is. And at the same time, a representative of the Ukrainian intelligence stated that 2 Su-57 aircraft were probably damaged at once. And while Russia is losing planes, Ukraine is using its own to strike targets on Russian territory. Ukrainian warplane fires weapons at targets inside Russia for the first time. As a Ukrainian military source tells Sky News, while damage assessment is still occurring, it is confirmed as a direct hit. The source said a Russian command node was hit on Sunday in the area of Belgorod, which is close to the border with northeastern Ukraine. It was not immediately clear what type of munition was used in the attack, including whether or not it had been a Western weapon. I will remind you that the United States and France recently said the Ukrainian armed forces were permitted to use their arms to strike military targets inside Russia, from where Russian forces are launching attacks against Ukraine itself. Under new guidance approved by President Joe Biden, American munitions can be used in Russian soil to help defend the city of Kharkiv. Lord Cameron, the UK Foreign Secretary, has been less specific, merely saying it was up to Ukraine to decide how they use British weapons, such as Shadow Storm cruise missiles that can be fired by Ukrainian jets. Earlier, Ukraine has launched multiple drone strikes deep into Russian territory, but the use of a warplane to strike targets inside Russia could be seen by Moscow as a new escalation. Are we waiting for new Kremlin objections or threats with nuclear weapons? The International Federation for Human Rights submitted a communication under Article 15 of the Rome Statute to the Office of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, drawing the court's attention to the criminal nature of hate speech in Russian media that has fueled international crimes in Ukraine, and seeking to compel the prosecutor's office to apply for arrest warrants. The submission targets Dmitry Medvedev, former president and current deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Solovyov, host of a popular television propaganda show on the state-owned television, Russia 1, Margarita Simonyan, editor-in-chief of Russia Today, Dmitry Kiselyov, head of the state-owned media group Россия Сегодня, and Sergei Mardan, a popular radio and television presenter. All of them have participated in a hateful campaign against Ukrainian civilians, encouraging and facilitating Russia's war crimes and other atrocities. The International Federation for Human Rights and its partners also believe that Alexei Gromov, first deputy to the chief of staff of the Presidential Executive Office, bears responsibility for the same acts as a superior who has either ordered their commission or failed to prevent them.
Every day, Ukrainians die under Russian bombs. Ukrainian civilians in the occupation are detained and tortured. Ukrainian children are deported to Russia, all because Russia wants to make them part of the Russian world. These grave violations of human rights would not be possible without the dehumanizing campaign of Russian propagandists, who are just as guilty as those who pulled the triggers, killing Ukrainian civilians. Alexandra Matvichuk, Vice President of the International Federation for Human Rights.
Human rights activists analyzed more than 2,000 video recordings of statements by Russian propagandists which they made after the start of the war against Ukraine, and identified about 300 statements that fit the definition of hate speech against Ukrainians. According to human rights activists, the actions of Russian propagandists can be qualified as a crime against humanity. In March last year, the ICC issued an arrest warrant for Putin and the so-called Commissioner for Children's Rights in Russia, Maria Lvova-Belova. They were suspected of illegally deporting Ukrainian children, which is classified as a war crime. The warrant is issued for life and can only be revoked if the Russian president is brought to trial. The Kremlin called the ICC decision insignificant and the very formulation of the question of Putin's arrest as outrageous and unacceptable. Press Secretary of Head of the State, Dmitry Peskov, noted that Moscow does not recognize the jurisdiction of the court. Nevertheless, in April, Putin signed a law criminalizing assistance in the execution of decisions of international bodies that Russia considers illegal. What I want to say, regardless of whether they recognize the jurisdiction or not, more and more Russians will be on the dock, and it is fair. The Kremlin's strategy to reformat the European Parliament has not been implemented. Europe remains with Ukraine and healthy pro-European forces. The European Parliament is one of the key bodies in making decisions and distributing the EU budget. For example, the dominance of pro-Russian politicians in it could mean a weakening of European support for us, for Ukraine. In the current European Parliament, the EPP party has the largest faction, and it will remain so in the new composition. It wins about 185 seats out of 720. Thus, the current head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, is the main candidate for a new term.
I have always said that I want to build a broad majority for a strong Europe. I have demonstrated in my first mandate what a strong Europe can achieve. My aim is to continue on this path with those who are pro-European, pro-Ukraine, pro-rule of law.
Ursula von der Leyen will start negotiations with the Social Democrat and Renew groups on a creation of a coalition of the center from today. But most importantly, the elections to the European Parliament showed the current preferences of European voters. For example, in Slovakia, Prime Minister Robert Fico's party was defeated in the elections, gaining 24%, while the liberal opposition party Progressive Slovakia took 27%. In Hungary, the ruling Fidesz party of Prime Minister Orban received its worst result in history, gaining 44% of the vote. Meanwhile, the opposition party Respect and Freedom, led by Peter Magyar, took 30%. In Germany, the government coalition of Chancellor Olaf Scholz was the conservative opposition. Christian Democratic Union of Germany became the winner, gaining 30% of the votes. Italy became one of the few countries where the Prime Minister's party won. Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy won 28% of the vote. In Poland, Donald Tusk's Civil Coalition and the former ruling party Law and Justice won the same number of seats, 20 each. But the European Parliament elections had the greatest impact on France. Marine Le Pen's National Union Party won there, gaining 31%. Macron's party took only 14%. That is why the French president announced early elections to be held on June 30th and July 7th. Here you can see how interesting elections can be. And most importantly, they show that every voice is important, unlike in Russia. That concludes our today's video. Thank you for watching. Stay updated, comment, like, and subscribe to our UATV English channel for even more news from Ukraine. It is your support that really matters for us. Goodbye.